Welcome to Trusty Chords, the podcast which aims to celebrate music and those that create it. If you've been listening to music over the last decade, then the name ILUKA might be one you've come across. After all, when you give an even cursory listen to her music, it's easy to see why her profile has been rising so rapidly in recent years. Born in Australia but now based in America, ILUKA grew up playing music, with this love being fostered by classic names like Stevie and Janis Joplin, all of which are names used in descriptors of her own music. But her music is far beyond derivative. It's born out of a soul background and filtered through a big pop lens that results in an inimitable, timeless quality that leaves ILUKA with a reputation as an artist who is impossible to ignore. In 2022, she released her debut album Queen of Turbulent Hearts, which arrived after years of singles and EPs. Now based in Los Angeles, she's been entering her new era with the release of plenty of fresh singles, and now she's gearing up to release a lot more amazing music in the near future, so keep your eye out because if you don't yet know her, ILUKA's name is one you'll be hearing plenty of. This week, the wonderful ILUKA is my guest, and she was a true dream to chat to, a great example of a musician doing everything they can to achieve their dreams and make the most of every opportunity that comes their way. I strongly urge you to check out ILUKA's latest batch of music, and once you're done giving that a spin, have a listen to our chat, and I'll see you at the end of the episode for some general housekeeping. ILUKA, thank you for joining the Trusty Chords podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, you're someone whose music has been getting into the ears of more and more people in recent years, but I guess for newcomers who've never heard your name, can you give me a quick few words on who you are and why you're here today?
I am an Australian-born singer-songwriter, I guess my music's kind of evolved, and it's forever evolving, but it's in the indie pop rock space, I guess. That's pretty much it.
It's always very hard to sort of describe your own music, isn't it? It's always because you're always aware of how you sort of make the music, but it's always so hard to sort of say where it fits into the grand scheme of things.
Right, categorize it, put it into a box, but it's, you need to do those things.
Exactly. I mean, I think everyone asks me what my own band sounds like, and the fact that we describe ourselves as about 3 different genres, then whatever, tells you exactly what you need to know. But this is about you, of course. So what I like to do in this podcast is sort of go back to the start and look at some of the earliest memories that you have of music and how that has affected you. So do you have a particular memory of when music first really resonated with you?
Yeah, I do. I was really lucky as a kid. My dad was also a songwriter, now builds guitars. He didn't when I was a kid, but very musical, played shows, was in a band. And so from pretty early on, I always had, there was always a guitar in the corner of my room as a kid since I was tiny. I don't ever remember not having a guitar. And my dad actually had this little 12-track recording desk that he would always be writing songs on. And it kind of began when I was about 4. We had a beautiful old grand piano at home. And I remember it wasn't really songs. It was more like these ditties that I would write. So I'd sit at the piano and, one was called like Pants, Diddle Diddle Dump. One was called Ball in a Hat. And they were very kind of like kids' nursery rhymes, but very nonsensical, silly. I was a bit of a eccentric little kid. I had this wild blonde bob, and I loved dressing up as eccentric characters. So I always had my little dress ups in the corner of my room, and I'd pull them out and I'd just sit on this piano and make up these nonsensical ditties. And then that kind of evolved into actual lyrics and thinking about the world and kind of forming some kind of thoughts and ideas about the world around me. And I actually recorded my first song with Dad when I was 7. And so he, at that point, played the guitar for me, and we kind of worked out the chords around this song that I'd written. And from then I've really been, the word is obsessed with songwriting, and especially growing up and working out, how to make sense of the world, I guess, and having a dad who was so awesome in terms of I got an idea and we would flesh it out and record this thing. And so from that point, I kind of have albums and albums worth of songs, a lot of absolute garbage there, but all little like snapshots into my life at that time, and also a snapshot into the influences I was listening to. You know, when I was 13, I was all about the pop chart. So I was writing these like really cheesy little love songs that were pretty awful, but that was what I was listening to. And then it kind of went into like, I was listening to a lot of folk albums, a lot of Dylan and Joni Mitchell at about like 15 and 16. And so I was writing more folk songs. And then it went into jazz because I started listening to a lot of jazz, and I was writing a lot of songs with your sevenths and your 13ths. And so it's kind of like ever evolving. But I love that I've been able to have, I think I was really lucky to have access to be able to record those ideas, because with songs, like, and I guess you speak to a lot of songwriters, and it goes like a song doesn't kind of stick around. It comes and it'll go if you don't kind of do anything with it. So I'm very much a believer in just putting it down, and it's so cool that I have so many songs that bookmark all these different eras of my life. So, and I'm still just as obsessed with songwriting as I've ever been. So I feel, yeah, really lucky that I was able to have that growing up.
I mean, I'm fairly sure that, you know, all of the best musicians are incredibly obsessed. That's what makes them great musicians. And it's also really great to
Totally.
know that you had that sort of support growing up. So, you know, all these years down the line, if you want to, you can look back to songs like your Pants Something and say, you know, if you need ideas for my next single, can dip into the
Totally.
archives, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you mentioned before sort of like some of the artists you were listening to when you were younger. So you mentioned like, you know, the pop charts and some of the folk artists and jazzy stuff. So apart from like the likes of, I think you mentioned Bob Dylan, was Joni Mitchell, like were there any particular
Mhm.
artists out there you were listening to at all?
Yeah. So yeah, that was definitely in my folk era, and I'm still I do still love, even though my music's definitely, I wouldn't categorize it as folk, but I love the songwriters of that era, and that's definitely what my parents played a lot of. And my mum was a huge Fleetwood Mac fan, so there was always Fleetwood Mac going on in the house. Obviously, Rumours was, I think, you know, the greatest pop record of all time,
It's
perhaps.
amazing.
Totally. My dad listened to a lot of Talking Heads, and that kind of remained with me. You know, like Remain in Light is, I think, one of the more genius records. And what else? There was a lot of even just I guess, the more rock stuff. There was a lot of Creedence, even the Doobie Brothers. So a lot of that, you know, whether you call it swampy kind of rock stuff, was always being played as well. Even like, you know, your Jackson Browns, and yeah, the kind of songwriters and the rock stuff. Then when I guess I left my parents' influence a little bit more, I went down more of the soul train, the soul train. And yeah, kind of went a little bit more into that world. So I really got into Nina Simone. You know, like, again, one of my favorite records of all time is What's Going On by Marvin Gaye. I think that record is just insanely incredible. And a lot of that world that I didn't have so much as a kid. Um, so yeah, there's a lot that I pull from in terms of influences. I really got into, for some reason, Bowie and Queen weren't like huge on my parents' radar, and I obviously got very into Bowie and Queen a little bit later on as well. So yeah, lots of influences.
Yeah, I always love asking that question because you just hear so many great names, and it's the sort of thing where you can start picking out the threads and sort of being like, "Oh, I hear a little bit of this in there." Like, obviously, there are, you know, a lot of people make comparisons to your music with like Stevie Nicks, for example, and then there's
Hmm.
Fleetwood Mac, and you're like, "Oh, I'm seeing where this thread comes from and everything," and it all starts making
Totally,
sense. How it really goes back to those early days, and I guess
absolutely.
as a very tenuous link, speaking of earlier days. So for me, you first got on my radar when I wrote a piece on Rolling Stone Australia about your collaboration with Lime Cordiale back in 2021.
Oh,
So
awesome. Yeah.
you had already been in the music industry for some time by that point, because I think if I trace back
Hmm.
things on Spotify, you're releasing singles in 2014, but obviously the music that you were creating that would have spanned back even further, obviously, just from a
Hmm.
general timeline chronological point of view. So I guess in 2014, what was it that sort of made you say, I want to go from creating music to actually sharing it with the world?
Do you know what? I've always had this, and I feel like a lot of artists, there's a point that they reach where they're like, okay, now it's time for the world, like to share things to the world. But I've always, and maybe it was the self confidence as a kid that, I was able to record, but I just always shared music. And to be honest, I was putting up stuff a lot earlier than that, but I've
Of
since
course, yeah.
taken some of it down because I'm like, my stuff is so different now. Not that I'm ashamed of it, but more so, I've just evolved so much since then. But
Yeah.
I've
There's a bit of artistic
always
growth going on, isn't there?
totally. But even, I was always putting out songs, and I remember even for school projects, I would submit, like I did one album and for a school project and submitted it. And not that I was putting, actually, no, I did put a couple of those songs up on YouTube then at the time. So I don't know, it's always been, music has always been synonymous to me with like putting it out into the world. And it doesn't come from this like, oh my God, like the world has to hear this, but more so, well, I wrote it and that was what I was feeling at that time. So surely someone connects with it. And I've never been really precious about stuff like that. I would rather just put it out there and then move on to the next thing. And yeah, I tend towards the not holding anything back. I mean, in saying that, I have like folders and folders of unreleased demos, but um, it's I'm not kind of guarding them for the reason of not wanting to share them to the world. I guess it's picking the best out of the bunch. But
Cool.
yeah, I've always just I don't know done that. I've just always been okay with putting it out there and not being too precious about it.
So then, when you did start really putting it out there and sort of saying, "This is who I am," this is me as an artist. So I guess between then and when your debut album came out in 2022, there was a lot of singles and EPs and everything. So looking
Mhm.
at that, I guess, I guess I could possibly say in one way, those formative years leading up to the album, that whole sort of like decadey part there, what was that sort of experience like for you? Because there's so much being released and there's so much positive feedback. So was there a specific point where you're sort of thinking, I'm doing something pretty special here. People are liking it. I'm on the right track.
To be honest, and thank you, that's such a wonderful thing to say. I from my where I was, it often didn't feel like that. I feel like for me, it's been a lot of starts and stops. There was labels and then management, and I
All the
feel
fun
like
stuff.
there
Yeah.
was, yeah. I feel like it's I wish I could say it's felt like a smooth road and that everyone was supportive and it was just kind of a growth thing. But yeah, I feel like it's been really tumultuous in terms of finding the right people around me who understand my vision and who are fully on board with the songs and I guess the whole world around the songs. And I really, yeah, I feel like it's been a bit of a tumultuous journey with that stuff. And I think the music, was always able to like get me through it and pull me through. But yeah, I can't remember exactly what the question was. What was the question again? So I can loop it back.
That's totally fine. I was just sort of saying, like, what was that experience like for you? And was there a specific sort of moment where you sort of thought, hey, I'm on the right track here, despite all this sort of,
Right.
the ups and downs of the industry and everything like that?
Totally. Yeah, for me, it's been a bunch of little moments for sure. Um, in between the kind of tumultuous ups and downs, there's been not one like big grand moment, but just a bunch of little moments where I'm like, okay, this is going in the direction I want it to go to. It might have been a slower, more tumultuous road than I would have initially have loved, but it's people are responding and yeah, I think take the small wins. I think as artists, especially in the world we live in now, we love to see big grand um, wins, online where everything is so, what's the word I'm looking for, kind of on show. You're always showing your best highlight reels, as they say.
Mm.
But I think sometimes it can be the small wins that maybe other people aren't even aware of, whether it's like writing a song. And for me, more recently, it's been actually really connecting with the fans. And although I've done that, I don't think I've done that to online to such a degree that some recent songs have been doing. And it's almost been this big lesson for me in like, let go of the industry. Like, don't, the focus doesn't need to be on the industry. The industry will follow if you're doing something authentic and fans are responding. And that's been a really big lesson for me recently, because maybe in the past I have been more focused on the industry, and that's maybe why those highs and lows did feel really high and low, because I was focused on being kind of accepted or something by the industry. And recently that's really shifted, and that's been one of my kind of personal wins that maybe people don't know about, but it's really connecting with my fans and seeing them respond to what I'm doing, and just forgetting about the industry, the focus being on the industry and what they think of it. It's like, no, 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 this is why I started this, was to connect with people. It wasn't to get the industry to approve of me. And that's been really exciting for me recently.
And of course, just how you're mentioning, you obviously mentioned the word tumultuous, for example.
Mm.
It seems like there might sort of be something of a link in the fact that your album was called Queen of Turbulent Hearts. Turbulent,
Yeah.
tumultuous. It seems like a bit of a link. But I guess releasing that album, like that must have also been quite a bit of a career-defining moment to not only get a full-length album out there, but to have actually navigated all of this tumult and turbulence and actually say, "This is me. Here is a full-length album." And
Hmm.
this is what I've been working on for a while.
Absolutely. And that record specifically was like embracing the messiness and the tumultuousness that has been my path and my road. That was kind of, you listen to all the songs on that, and that is, it's this kind of acceptance of a bit of a wild road that I've taken, and the songs that reflect that. So yeah, for sure.
So we had the album in 2022, then we had the Haunted One single late last year. So now we've just had Cry Evil, which comes from the Haunted One EP, which is released on September 20th, though we're recording this a little bit ahead of time. The EP would have come out last month. It's confusing. I'll edit this little bit out, but I'm sure I could put my own thoughts behind the music and talk about the incredibly passionate and pertinent lyricism in things like Cry Evil. But I'd love to get
Mhm.
your thoughts on that new song before I touch on the EP, because currently it is your most recent single, and it's undoubtedly one of the most impressive singles I've heard in the last couple of months. So I guess what went into this song?
I wrote this song, and again, this I've never approached songwriting in the way I did with this song. I usually approach songwriting in that there might be a lyrical idea, there might be a melodic idea, and I kind of work through it and let it come out any way it wants to. With this song, I was feeling, there was multiple things going on around the world, and I now live in the US, and everyone knows what's going down here as of recent. And yeah, I just had a lot of kind of anger, and I knew that I wanted to use that and write something, but I guess I wanted to write something that was really direct, and it was kind of like a punch in the face, because that's what these issues that I'm kind of embedding into the song, figuratively, I like. I didn't want people to turn away. I wanted to like hit them really hard, and I've never written in that way before. But it was just kind of where I was at, and I literally, sat at this dining room table that I'm actually sitting at now, and with no instrument, which is also weird for me, and I was just like hitting like a beat with my hands against the table and singing those verses, and they kind of just came out as this like, I don't even know how you describe the melody, but very raw and direct. And I wanted to challenge people. I wanted people to be challenged in some way. So that's how that song came about.
And then I guess following on that thread, the new EP that you've got coming out, what does it say about your current era and the music that you're making? Is the EP designed to sort of be a punch in the face for for everything that you're sort of making, or is it sort of more a case of again, this is me, who I am currently?
Yeah, I think this is me, who I am currently. It is definitely more raw than definitely a lot of the songs on my record. It's a lot more raw, a lot more direct. It's probably a little bit darker sonically, just because that's, again, what I've been attracted to, and where I feel like I want to be writing right now. So it's kind of a culmination. And I think as well, just like, I made this move to the US during the lead up and into all these songs, and went through that whole stage of moving countries and leaving family. And not that any of the songs are like specifically about that, but I think imbued in all the songs is this like not giving so many fucks. This kind of like, I just feel like I've gone through this kind of crazy life changes, and really had to like dig into myself as a person, because I think being out here in a city like Los Angeles, where there's so many people doing it and trying to do it and make their dreams happen, people always say about this city, you can either sink or swim. And whilst I don't think everything is that black and white, there is some truth to it. Like I really do feel like you can get completely overwhelmed by everyone trying to do the thing out here, or you can go, okay, well, I'm going to dig in really deep and figure out exactly what I want to say that's different from everyone else, how to be like fully authentically myself, in comparison to a lot of people out here which maybe aren't doing that. And that's the kind of journey into living here and being out here, was definitely having to like really dig deep and be like, okay, what is it that I want to say? Who am I as an artist? What is the thing that sets me apart from everyone? Because there are so many people, talented people out here doing the thing. What do I have to give in this space? So that is definitely the foundation of this bunch of songs, is definitely that feeling of really digging deep and getting really raw with myself and my music.
Well, I certainly think there is need for applause just in the fact that you're not only making music, but also have made such a huge leap to move to a city like Los Angeles and basically say, I am going to survive as a musician as well. Because, I mean, Los Angeles scares me. I spend a lot of time in the US, but Los Angeles, it scares me at times. So,
oh yeah,
complete kudos to you. You're doing amazing. So I feel like we should get down to the portion of the podcast from which its namesake is derived. So Trusty Chords sees me follow the 1, 3, and 5 structure of a standard chord. You were talking about 7th chords before, so you know what I'm talking about. And I ask you about 1 artist that has impacted you, 3 albums that have influenced you, and 5 songs you can always turn to. And these albums and songs don't need to be by your one artist. So I'd love to kick things off by saying, ILUKA, what is, or who is, the one artist that has inspired you the most, whether it be personally or creatively?
Do you know what? I'm sorry, I wish I could have really succinct answers with this stuff, but it's forever changing. And recently I saw St. Vincent for the first time. I don't know how I haven't seen her before now, because I am a fan of her. But she the live show and her music over the years, I honestly didn't get into her till a little bit later, to like the kind of Mass Seduction, which was what, 2017. Um, but seeing her live was one of the most incredible things one of the most incredible live shows I've ever seen. And since then, I've been getting back into her older stuff again, and seeing her progression and seeing the way she just commits to the sound, and she's just created her own space sonically, visually. And what a badass performer, what a brilliant guitar player. So right now, I'm going to say St. Vincent.
She's a truly, truly amazing performer. Actually, I mean, I'm very jealous that you've had the chance to see her. She's always eluded me, although I think she's just announced some
Mm,
Australian shows, so I feel like I need to move quick to make sure that happens. But I can completely understand where you're coming from there. Such a truly badass performer across the board, and amazing songwriter
absolutely.
as well.
Yeah.
So my next question here is, what are the three albums that have impacted you the most? This could be albums you're always throwing on, or something that was more integral to your music evolution.
I would have to say Blue by Joni Mitchell. Again, it was integral when I first listened to it as a teenager, and just the rawness of the songwriting. I mean, my God, I'd never heard anything like that when I listened to it. The kind of brutal rawness of the lyrics and her storytelling and that voice,
The
and it's
voice is
just
amazing.
now like, oh yeah, it's such a comfort album to me. I really, when I'm feeling like a bit homesick or a little bit blue, I always put on that record, and it just like takes me into this beautiful soft space. So that'll always be one of the albums for me.
And were the two other albums that you had at all there?
Oh yeah. So sorry. The other two, yes. I would say, again, this changes all the time. I know I mentioned it before, the Marvin Gaye "What's Going On." Again, it's always the when I first listened to it, um, it's such its own world sonically. And of course, like before that, Marvin Gaye had been singing these sweet love songs, and that this record was his kind of fuck you to the label didn't want to release it. It was just a moment of him taking charge of his artistry and what he wanted to say, and getting political for the first time, and doing it in this like beautiful, raw, soulful way. And that record, especially with my new stuff, like sonically, yeah, that's I've really gone back to that record. And it, again, I tend to revisit it a lot, because it's amazing. Oh, third record. I mean, it's a toss up between, I feel like Rumors is like a classic for me. I mean, every song is such a classic song. The pop world, I think the songwriting is genius. As a band, they're impeccable in that whole record, and just the drama behind it all is like
Absolutely.
everyone loves the drama behind songs, and everyone knew what was going on from the outside, and we got to have these kind of really intimate songs reflect all these crazy stories that people were hearing at the time. And I think that's pretty wild and very cool.
I've also always found it wild that and I had to actually look it up as you were saying these, but both What's Going On and Rumors are both the 11th albums by those artists. It's amazing that they have had these such groundbreaking albums, and it
Oh,
came, as their 11th album. It's amazing to think that they had 10 albums worth of great
wow.
stuff, but it didn't quite catch fire like these other ones did. That's just a little fact that I thought was quite amazing as I was quickly looking that up.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow. I had no idea.
Yeah,
Wow.
because I'm fairly sure Joni Mitchell's was like her third or fourth album or something. But the others, I mean,
Yeah.
having 10 albums and then you come out with stuff like that, like, oof, that's amazing.
Wow. Totally. And it's such a testament to the artistry and being able to evolve, and the more you live life and the more rich experiences you have, the more you can write about those rich experiences. And I love that.
And of course, even if that rich experience is drama, hey, it just makes her a better album,
Yes.
doesn't it?
Exactly.
So lastly, I'd love to know the 5 songs you can always turn to, whether it be for comfort, for excitement, anything at all, your 5 trusty songs.
Ooh. Okay, I would say number 1. Again, this is probably my right now list. I would say, actually, I've been listening to a lot of the music that I have been talking about is older stuff, and it's the older stuff that I definitely listen to the whole records. I feel like I've been listening to a lot more new stuff recently, so I might talk about some of those songs that I've been listening to. I have been loving Chapel Roan,
Oh, yes.
and I think I've been listening to, that her whole record, The Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess, but I don't know, songs like Casual. I don't know. I think it's impeccable songwriting. So I would say she's up there. I would say, I'm trying to stay modern, but then I go to Kate Bush.
Well, Chapel Roan and Kate Bush, they're two sides of the same coin, aren't they?
Totally. But this woman's work, I would say, the Kate Bush song, because it's just, Kate Bush is another genius storyteller, songwriter that just creates her own visual sonic scape that is just like unlike anything.
She's untouchable.
Untouchable, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of Ethel Cain, or Ethel Cain. I think that's probably how you say it, Ethel Cain. American Teenager, I think, came out maybe a few years ago, and that's just, I'm always listening to that song. It's such an amazing song. And am I on number 5?
This is number 4, I think you're up to.
Number 4, okay. Maybe New York by St. Vincent. Again, just like, and I remembered that when she was playing live, and I was like, my God, this is an amazing, incredible song, just heartbreaking, but she does it in this, gorgeous way. The story and the story of the city that she, once called home. And number 5, I would say, I'm a huge Lana fan. So I would say maybe California by Lana Del Rey. That's just I feel like I listen to Lana in the whole records as well. So it feels almost bad to say one of her songs, because again, she creates such a world with each record. But yeah, maybe because I live in California now, I kind of have a connection to that song.
Honestly, yeah. You could pick anything off of that Lana album. Because that's from Norman fucking Rockwell, I think, isn't it?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. That album, that's a 10 out of 10. You really can't go past any song on
God.
that. And you listen to it as one solid piece, and you're just like, yeah, it's impossible to go piecemeal on this thing.
Oh, totally. Like the greatest on there, actually, now thinking about it, is, Mariner's Apartment Complex, Venice Bitch. Yeah, that's probably favorite Lana record, actually.
Yeah, actually, I think I'd be right there with you, and I would be willing to say it's probably one of the high points of art made this century. Although I could be very controversial, because we've still got how many years? 76 years left in this century. But hey, but I guess before we start working out what happens in the next 76 years, I should say, ILUKA, thank you so much for your time and for being part of the Trusty Chords podcast today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Trusty Chords. If you've listened to this episode and enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you were able to take a few moments to like, follow, share, and review this podcast on your preferred platform of choice. As always, there's no obligation, but I'm forever grateful if you do. If you're eager to follow along on social media, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. There's also a blog for this podcast on my website, which is tylerjenke.com. That's TYLERJENKE/Trusty Chords Podcast, all one word. That's where you'll find entries on each episode each week and a list of all the artists, albums, and 5 songs chosen by my guests each week, along with an accompanying playlist too. You can also find a link to the Buy Me a Coffee platform where you can throw me a few dollars to keep the podcast running if you feel so inclined. As usual, thanks to everyone who continues to listen, message, or just support this podcast in any way. I'm forever grateful to hear from you all each and every week. Lastly, I need to thank ILUKA for spending time with me this week for the podcast, and I also need to thank Jerry from How Good for helping organize this chat as well. But once again, thank you kindly for listening, and I hope to see you all again next week as I continue to celebrate music and those that create it.